Hey everyone. In this episode, my friends Chaim Rutman and Rabbi Yosef Kurtz discuss Why Aren't Our Kids in Shul? An article by Rabbi J. Goldmintz way back from 2011. It'll be linked in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. All right, boys. So let's do this. So I'll just go through and summarize the article, and then we'll jump in. We're pulling Rabbi J. Goldmintz out of the dustbin of history. So the article is from 2011, which I didn't even realize when I.
Oh, it's from 2011.
Article was featured in the summer 2011 issue of Jewish Action, which is
It gives me a whole different perspective of the article.
Yeah,
it just does. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy when you think back 2011, the world has freaking changed.
The world is very different, especially shul-wise, and what this article relates to is very different.
Right. It's pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Right. Pre-even smartphones.
I was going to say pre-technology.
Yeah.
Like that was the first thing that my head went to. When
Pre-social media.
Pre-social media. Yeah. Teenagers are a different breed today than they were in 2011.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Meaning,
yeah,
I would think it's worse today,
right,
than it was back then.
Right. All right. Let me do the summary. So he identifies a problem. Problem for him is teenagers are not in shul on Shabbos, right? And he says it makes sense because shul's boring. Most kids, despite a good yeshiva education, I would probably argue with that qualifier as good, but despite a yeshiva education or a Jewish day school education, don't understand the davening. It's too long. And it feels like school. It feels like it's something that's required that you have to be at. Then he brings up this research that kind of anchors the article. And it's research from, I guess, Christian youth groups. Basically, it's the eat your vegetables approach. Kids, adults who attend, in the case of the research, church, are more likely to have attended church when they were kids. In other words, if you're forced to go to shul as a kid, you're more likely to go to shul as an adult. So the messaging being, if your kid's going to shul is a priority, then forcing them, even though they don't want it, you're that much more likely to, have kids who grow up to be adults who go to shul. So that's like eat your vegetables, right? Like you do it for the kid, even though it's not necessarily what they want to do, but the end result is going to be good. Now, he briefly glosses over the possibility that changes might be needed in shul, right? That shul itself, the structure of shul, might not be the most conducive, but he doesn't really get into that. And then he flips it to, I think, what his main point is, that we need a change and that we should see attendance in shul less as this external thing we're imposing on our children, but more as a point of contact where we can expand, enhance, invest in our relationships with kids. So he brings up the idea of walking to shul as like that could be even more important than shul itself because you're building these memories. And he actually has a great reference here, which he refers to another article he wrote where he talks about spiritual capital, right? Where you build these sort of moments of spiritual investment, whether it's, the walks to shul, sitting next to your father in shul, the events that you don't necessarily even remember the details as an adult, but it kind of builds up this capital base inside you where you have positive, warm associations with shul. That's kind of the overview of the article.
It felt like the tone of the article was speaking about this thing that you and I discuss a lot called modern orthodoxy.
Right.
And what is it and who does it talk about today and what does it represent, which I struggle understanding. But I ask myself, is it only for modern orthodoxy? Because I could tell you as somebody who wasn't as much of a shul goer growing up, but certainly am more of one now. I think it happens in the yeshiva world too. I think it happens in the ultra-Orthodox world too. I don't know if it would just be the modern Orthodoxy, and I don't know that if he didn't bring that up in the article, it would look any different.
Yeah, I agree with that. What do you think?
So it happens to be that this article, there's a tremendous amount of overlap with my doctoral thesis topic. My topic is religious transmission, specifically how the effect of a positive relationship, davening and learning with your children, the effect that has on their religious transmission later in life. So not exactly the same topic, but there is a lot of overlap. The point that I just want to bring up before we continue the conversation is the reason I think that there's still room to explore this topic. In the article, he cites Christian research, and I argue that Christian research does not translate to be completely equal to shul going. Mm-hmm. There's large differences. Number one, there's a big gender disparity that exists in shul going that doesn't exist in Christian, church going. And number two, I think that there's, in general, like a higher level of commitment needed once a child hits the age of bar mitzvah. There's a tremendous amount of pressure placed on the child in terms of everyday shul going. It's not just once a week social event, but it is a larger commitment.
Right. Well, that goes back to Chaim's comment. I think that does depend what community you're in.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you're in the modern Orthodox community, your father's not going to shul. I guess though you're still in school, right? So you have your school's requiring you, if you're a boy, to go to minyan every day, and even if you're a girl, I mean, it's requiring you to do some sort of davening.
And I would say that in the modern Orthodoxy world, there are many people that go to shul every single day.
Right.
But I think that, to be honest, I think that looking from our childhood, let's say the 80s and 90s, I think, and I didn't do research on this, but I would imagine that the percentage of modern Orthodox to centrist yeshivish, the percentage of people who went to minyan 3 times a day was far higher 30 years ago than it is today. And you can't ignore, like, part of my research also shows the effects of inconsistency amongst parents. Like, you can't force your child to go to shul and sit there in shul and then go talk the whole time and go drink at Kiddush Club. That will not guarantee religious transmission. You'll have a child who resents their parents and resents the inconsistencies that they see at home and in shul. So I look at that as being a very significant shift, that there are a lot of people that identify as being Orthodox and modern Orthodox today that don't go to shul, and I don't think those were in the same numbers 30, 40 years ago.
Can we talk about that for a sec? Like, what was your experience growing up? Like, I had to sit next to my father in shul, and I didn't like it, but I had to sit there. Like, my father davened in Rabbi Obam Shul in Kew Gardens Hills, and davening was long, and they did the, Mishaberachs, the shnuttering between Aliyos, and the rabbi spoke, and he gave a long speech, and I had to sit there. And it was not a pleasant experience. I had friends who were allowed to run around outside, and I wasn't. And what was your experience?
I had a more positive experience, I think. I grew up in the Or Chaim Minyan. Davening started early. It was fairly efficient. Short Divrei Torah was kind of like the model back then. But I grew up. I had a father who never spoke during shul, who was, took davening seriously. Maybe there were times that I resented it or didn't love it. But I think it was a fairly positive experience growing up. But I remember hating davening in school. And at one point, my father suggested to the school that I don't daven in school.
What did you not like about davening in school?
I would get in trouble because I would talk to my friends, and I despised the rule that you had to wear a jacket. I don't know. I was once I hit grade 8, especially, that I had to wear a jacket at davening. I didn't like that. I didn't like someone telling me that I was more religious if I had an extra layering on top. I was uncomfortable. I didn't like the whole jacket idea. So my father suggested to the school that if I would go with him every morning and learn with him before or after Shah, we went to 6:30 Shachris at Chaver Shas. This is, I think, starting in grade 6. Every morning I davened with him at 6:30 at Chaver Shas, and then we would learn after. And then he took me to school. He suggested to the school, he asked if that would work, and it did. And
That was more appealing to you?
yeah,
Wow. You really hated that jacket.
I really hated the jacket.
Yeah. So I also hated the jacket, but I didn't go to shul at 6:30 in the morning. For me, it was somewhat in the middle. I loved spending time with my dad. My dad he worked hard, so he wasn't around much during the week. Shabbos was the day to spend time with him. He was somewhat insistent that we stayed in during davening, and that we had some decorum. I grew up in Viewmount. Viewmount was one of the main shuls back then. So we had a lot of friends there. All of us pretty much came from the same backgrounds. So we stayed in during davening. My father would let me go out during laning a little bit just to air out. As I got older, I didn't watch my father go out for a Kiddush club, but I certainly did. Okay, and that certainly put me on a path for a couple of years where davening wasn't the most important thing. I always went to shul. Shul was always very social for me.
Right.
So it wasn't a matter of not going. It was a matter of not being in the shul. But I loved shul. I mean, the Kiddush Club was where all my friends, like we were all together. Not the best forms of ourselves, but we were all together. But I would say that I didn't understand davening. I wasn't taught davening when I was growing up. You know, they focused on the words, but not the meaning behind it.
Right.
Or at least I don't remember having it.
I don't think we ever. I mean, I remember, this I credit my mom for, she got me a Mitzuda sitter at some point, like, I don't know, shortly after my bar mitzvah. And that had, just a line by line. And that's how I learned the translation of davening, was from davening from that Mitzuda sitter. I took it seriously because I wanted to learn it. But that was, otherwise I don't think we ever learned it in school.
I'm thinking now, my daughters who came back from Rabbi Kurtz taught them in high school. When they came back from Israel,
None of my chopped liver.
they had their. You did too,
Thank
but
you.
the Rabbi Kurtz and Mr. Rapp. Their Sidurim are so worn out from highlighters and stickies and little words written on the pages as this first and this and meanings towards it. I don't know if I don't know if that's a girl versus boy thing in seminary. I can tell you that I wasn't very attentive in yeshiva and less in Israel. But they came back they went to Shalvim, but I've seen it from other schools as well. They came back knowing exactly what they were saying.
It is girls versus boys. I don't think boys ever touch it. You go through, forget modern Orthodox. You go through the Haredi system. I don't, as far as I know, as far as I've seen, you learn Gemara, you daven. At some point, there's an expectation that you'll figure out what you're saying. Whatever it is, Tehillim, Shmona Esrei, like the Arts Girl has a little 2-word summary of every, thing, every bracha in Shmona Esrei. So at some point, you figure out the words. Your Hebrew gets a little bit better, a little sharper. And there's an expectation that, you just know through learning. Maybe you learn halacha. It tells you a little bit about what kavanas to have. But at no point do you sit down and take a beer tefillah class in Brisk. As far as I know, I've never been. I didn't get admitted, but as far as I know.
So we've all had experiences then where our fathers took shul seriously, right, and imposed it on us. And we've ranged in whether that was particularly enjoyable or unenjoyable. How many of us, and I definitely include myself in this, and our contemporaries are doing the same for their kids in the ways that our fathers did?
So,
I mean, you're the rabbi.
but this is what I really want to study. The chair of my doctoral program the head of the doctoral program, he's also the chair of my research paper, says that qualitative research is like looking under the hood of a car and seeing what makes the car run. I want to look at discovering through qualitative research, through interviews, how to create those positive moments in religious rituals while raising our children. That, I think, has not been given enough attention because it's not a simple answer. I think people...
Because we take a step back, though, from that. Like, I'm going to assume our generation's different, right? Do we all agree that we are raising our kids vis-a-vis shul differently than we were raised?
I think
vis-a-vis shul.
Beyond shul, I think we are raising our kids differently than the way we were raised.
Right. So why is that? Like, why are we doing...
In what way? Quantify that.
I can quantify it.
Yeah.
I think in some ways we were more resilient than kids today are. I think we had less, I'm going to use words, it's intimidating in this podcast because I got a rabbi to the left of me and I got an intellect to the right of me, and I'm the dumb guy in the room. So I'm going to use words that maybe aren't as the right words, but there were less excuses back then. Nobody said ADD to me back then. Nobody said oppositional defiance disorder or any of these types of things. I think that we just were more resilient. We were I'm not going to say we were more sensitive, but we certainly hit it better. So we are raising our kids.
Can we drill down on that for a second? Why were we more resilient than our kids are?
Because we care that our children are happy.
Right. That's what I think. I mean, my parents did a wonderful job with me and my siblings, but my happiness was not a particular... I mean, if I was like beyond extensively miserable, they probably would have noticed. But put yourself in this position. You're a teenager again,
right,
and you come home from school and you say to your parents, I'm really unhappy. What's your parents' response?
Figure it out.
Right. Figure it out, or welcome to being a teenager.
Ooh, I was never happy.
Right, right. Like when was life supposed to be about your happiness? But our kids come home, and say that to us, and if there are tears attached to it, right, it's even more impactful. And we're moving mountains for them.
So I can understand that. I'm not gonna. I can't. Maybe it's the child in me today. I can't say that my parents were less concerned about happiness. I would say that there were, like I said before, today a kid comes home and is unhappy or feels picked on in school. There's an IEP and there's a documented or a medication for everything. Back then, it was you just got to try harder. Like those are the times that
there were downsides to that. I mean, I had an undiagnosed learning disability my entire time at school.
Yeah.
Because I was like right on the borderline testing wise, and I was like, you just try harder, right? And there was nothing I would have had full student support today, but the downside was that I had a miserable experience in school. I always felt like I should be doing better than I was doing, and I felt like school defined me in a way I didn't want to be defined. So there are downsides to it, but like everything, every pain point, there's resilience that you develop out of that.
But there's another thing also, and I think as educators, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. I've been on boards to see this, at least from my perspective. Back then, the answer was if it's student versus teacher always wins.
Right. Yeah.
At the end of the day,
no question.
At the end of the day, we're backing the teacher. You got to make it work. Today, I understand that. As a kid, I didn't really understand that.
And we had some doozy teachers.
Oh,
we had some teachers who were certainly emotionally abusive.
I was just talking to my dad about this 2 days ago. The scariest time of the year for me was the day after PTA.
Yeah, me too. I was telling my son this.
That was not a good day in the Rutman house. I can tell you one thing. I left the house about 5:45 that morning, and I didn't come home till late. But today, and I think it's gone out of control, the parents more often than not take an oppositional approach to the school, how could I ever believe that my kid isn't perfect, or how could I ever believe that my kid, and they're not all the time.
Well, I've had parents say specifically to me as a point of pride, I am going to fight for my kid, meaning seeing that as my primary job is to be in opposition to you because this is what my kid wants, and my job right now is to back you up. And that's something, to back my kid up rather. That's something I don't think our parents had at all.
But I will say, there's a fine line between being an advocate for your kid, which is important, and teaching your kid that school is wrong. In other words, if you're coming home and at the Shabbos table or at the breakfast table, you're talking about how this teacher is horrible and this principal was wrong and this head of school doesn't pay enough attention to the school, all you're doing is you're teaching your kid they don't have to respect the school either. It's a dangerous road to go down. I would think it's a dangerous road to go down. It's okay. It's important for you to advocate for your kid. It's important for you to support your kid. It's important for you to sit in a room and say, look, my kid did wrong, but let's punish, but let's control.
Can I tell you an extreme example?
Please.
This is probably the most extreme example I've ever seen in education. I was running an NCSY trip, so this wasn't school, but we were in Israel, and one night, one of the staff members came to me and said, I smelled alcohol. I think there's some kids drinking. So I went to a room, and I caught these kids red-handed, b'shas ma'isa. One girl ran away with the bottle. She was pouring it down the toilet when I asked her to give it to me in a bottle of vodka. So I set the boys down, and I said, one-on-one, and I had them all individually, and I said, be honest with me. Were you drinking? The boy said, yes, I was drinking. I'm sorry. Please don't send me home. I was drinking vodka and, yada, yada. So fine. So I call the parents the next day. It was late at night already. It was probably 2 a.m. when this happened. So I needed to just clear it with my boss at NCSY, whatever. We decided we're going to send them home. Call the parents the next day. So the parents had time to plan. And I called the dad, and the dad said, my kid is innocent. I said, listen, I saw him drinking. And I asked him, were you drinking? And he said, yes. He said, no. You have to understand something. He said, my kid has never touched alcohol in his life. Last night, someone handed him a cup of orange juice. And in the orange juice, there was vodka. Now, he thought he was drinking orange juice, but it was mixed with vodka. When you asked him, were you drinking vodka? He said, yes. But it was unknowingly, and it was a total accident, and he's never tasted vodka in his life. And I'm fighting with this parent. I'm going back and forth. The parent threatened to sue me, sue NCSY, had a lawyer on the phone. It was a disaster. And at some point, I said to the parent, I said to the dad, do you really think this is in the best interest of your child, what you're doing now? And then I shouldn't have said that because that didn't go well, and they didn't take well to that. But that's how far the lengths people will go to believe their children and fight for what they think is in the best interest for their happiness.
So why do you think that is? Because my theory on this is that it's our trauma that we're playing out. That we suffered like every kid suffers, right? We had teachers who were not the kindest to us, who were abusive to us. And I think we felt alone. As kids, as teenagers, and whatever it was, our parents were not particularly into what was going on in our lives, and we didn't share. It wasn't necessarily their fault. We didn't tell our parents the friends issues we had, whatever was happening, right? And I think that trauma makes us want to be there for our kids in a way our parents weren't. And I'm not knocking our parents because we just established that we were far more resilient as a result of this. But I think that's at play here, which is why I don't think we come down on our kids for not being in shul the way our parents did, because at the end of the day, this is the thing in the article, right? He's talking about teenagers. But the reality is kids aren't in shul when they're 8 or 10. And we were in shul when we were 8 or 10, right? And we're not doing what our parents did for a reason. Not because we're more self-centered, I don't think, right? I think that I can't imagine being the way my father was with me, with my kids. It doesn't fit for me because if I did that, I would feel badly. I would feel unnatural, right? I would feel like it's not the type of relationship I want to establish with my child.
Let me ask a different question that's related. Do you think that 30 years ago, 50 years ago, let's say post-Holocaust, the kids that went off the derech, so to speak, went harder and further than the ones today who are raised with white gloves and kind of coddled a lot more? Where today it's like, okay, I'm not going to be religious, but it's a softer landing because there was never anyone pushing me. But back then, you don't come to shul, you get a slap in the face. So there was that resentment. Because I wonder.
I've seen that in my career in education. Meaning, I think that kids, in the 20 years I've been doing this, I think that kids today, first of all, I think fewer kids are going off the derech, actually, because I think that there's far more elasticity in how you can live within an Orthodox community than we saw and observed growing up. But beyond that, I think that kids today feel like, in the end, I'm happy here, I'm comfortable here, and there's going to be much more room for me to stay. Whereas we felt like, you're either in or you're out.
You think today less kids are off the derech than before?
They do. What do you think? You deal with this more.
I would guess that.
Wait, can I do one thing before you answer?
Yeah.
Can we define off the derech, right? Because I think that's
Okay, so
that's an important thing, right? Because to me, and this gets into a little bit of like Israel reality also, like you can be sort of marginally observant but still engaged. You have many. You see this even in like public personalities. You have many more personalities that are much more elastic in their personal observance, but yet still invested in living and being part of the Orthodox community. Does that make sense?
Well, I think there's a difference between the terms off the derech and at risk. And I think sometimes those...
Can you define that?
I think those get blended.
Yeah.
Off the derech, and again, I'm not the educator, but to me, off the derech is checking their phone on Shabbos.
Yeah.
Okay, might be considered off the derech. Driving, okay, on Shabbos might be considered off the derech. At risk is more unsafe behavior. Okay, and that's parallel, and that comes with, it's like a gift with purchase. Okay, that comes with the non-observance, but as well dangerous behavior. So sometimes those two get blended. I would say today we have more of a challenge than we did when I was growing up. Okay,
Which off the derech or at risk or both?
I would say with both. To be honest with you, I think there's more toys today for kids to play with.
See, I wouldn't include checking your phone on Shabbos as being off the derech.
Okay.
Again, because I'm not creating a halachic definition here, right? I'm creating a definition of leaving the community, right? So I think you have more, honestly, to be completely honest, families that have very flexible interpretations of Shabbat observance in their home, who still attend Orthodox shuls, who still send their kids to Orthodox schools, right? There's a reality today where people want to buy into the community. They see value in the community, even if they themselves are not particularly invested in the details of observance.
So
to me, off the derech is like a very public thing. It's like, I'm out, right? Like,
but tell me what that means. Sorry, Yosef, but tell me what that means. Public thing, I'm out. Are you saying he doesn't wear a kippah on the street anymore?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it is visible to everyone in the community.
So you're not touching drugs, you're not touching alcohol, you're not touching...
No, I wasn't
girls.
talking about at risk at all.
You're just
Not that
talking
that's not
about-
an issue, but yeah.
Okay, so let me give you another question.
Yeah.
If a kid doesn't wear tzitzis,
Yeah.
is that off the derech?
No.
Okay. So off the derech means, in your definition, it's public defiance, okay, within the community.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's how I think we would have thought of it when we were kids, when there were fewer toys, right? When you didn't have this like ability to kind of carve out a niche for yourself, right? Also, there was just less range in the Orthodox community. So when someone went off when we were kids, they went off and you knew they weren't from anymore and they weren't really around. Whereas here you have people who are around, who are in the community, who are present in shul every Shabbos, who they themselves may not be personally observant.
That's the point I'm bringing up, is that people who, let's say you define off the derech as someone who's mechala Shabbos b'farhesia, so someone who will drive on Shabbos in public. My point that I'm bringing up is I wonder if more of those people today are less resentful, meaning I have lots and lots of students who would qualify under this category of being off the derech, meaning they were...
My category of Chaim's.
I think both. I don't think there's a huge difference.
It's
meaning
not a huge difference.
They grew up Shomer Torah mitzvos and they no longer are, but they still have a good relationship with me. Whereas my guess is that 40 years ago, the ones who went off with resentment, with more resentment. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that's the case. And maybe, maybe today the numbers are higher even. It could be, meaning you might, I don't know. I know that the OU is in the process of a many years long study of studying this. They've finished step one of the qualitative
we're
research.
supposed to do a podcast on that.
Right. And they're now going to do many more levels of studies on these numbers. Rabbi Hauer was championing that, Olav Shalom. And so I don't know whoever is going to take it over, if there's going to be a change in direction in terms of the OU research department. But we're in the process of studying that. I wonder if parents today are scared of creating resentment, and because of that, they're scared of creating boundaries and rules, and so they allow for children not to come to shul on Shabbos because I don't want to turn him off.
I think...
Okay, he's not from, but maybe he'll come back because I'll still show him love.
Okay, can I give you another version of what you're saying? Because I think your version still is rooted in this idea that the sine qua non is being on the derech. But I think a lot of adults have the approach of, the most important thing to me is my kid still is around in my life. That my kid's still with me for Shabbos meals.
That's what
my
I'm
kid's
saying.
still with me, right? So it's not that I want to show them love because they'll maybe come back. It's in the end of the day, being on the derech is not the most important thing to me. A relationship with my child is the most important thing to me. And I think a generation ago, parents were much more willing to say those two things are exactly the same.
It's a hard discipline. Not for myself. We're all taking the personal out of this because we have family members that are going to be hearing this, but it's hard discipline. If you have a child that is non-observant and you have other children that are, what do the other kids see? That kid can do this and my kid can't. It's true. More than anything in the world, I would think a parent wants to keep their kids close. But it affects everybody, when you have that. And some people aren't able to be their best self with it. If you have kids that are in the shidduch world, okay, and now all of a sudden it's going to be a little bit of a difficulty because they have kids that aren't from, and now they're being judged that way. That's also a difficulty. These things have to be weighed. I think we have less shock value today than our parents had as well. Right. I think we're more... I can tell you myself, I don't get surprised as much as I used to when I see certain things on the street or I hear certain things. Right. And that's not a good thing. Okay, I think that's a bad thing. So I think it's just become more accepted the same way other things have become more accepted. Divorce has become more accepted than it was when I was growing up. Because it happens so often, unfortunately, today. I want to go back to one other thing. You were asking a question with regards to teachers, and why is it back then that people questioned, less than they question today? I wonder, and I asked the teachers here this question: did parents have more faith in teachers back then than they do today? Was the talent in teachers more qualified back then than it is today?
Those are two very different questions.
Yeah, to the second question, I have an unambiguous no.
Yeah, absolutely
today's
not.
teachers are far more invested talented professional than the yokels that we had.
I would think so.
I mean, that's for sure
I would
the case.
think
But your first question about whether our parents were more invested, I think is probably true. But I have a little bit of a cynical take, probably not surprisingly, seeing how our differences are developing. Like, for me, I think that for our parents, like, they were burdened with like earning a living, with having Holocaust survivors as parents, with all the things that they were burdened with, right? And for them, it was like, this is school's, like, I'm thrilled that this is school's department. I don't want this on my agenda, right? And so they were more willing to just defer to the school, even if the school was terrible, right? Because that was what they paid their money for, and that was the school's problem.
Because you and I, Yosef, we grew up pretty much the same way. It's interesting. The quality of teacher is far different today than it was back then.
Yeah.
But you have less support from parents now, sometimes, than you had back then.
Yeah. I mean, the mentality then was, I know best. I'm the teacher. I've done it this way for 30, 40 years, right? I had some of the same teachers my father did. And it was just, this is the way I teach. Some of them, I had teachers who were half blind and you could just walk it. Like, they were hardly with it. I have a hard time thinking. I had some tremendously talented teachers. Just had the honoring of Rabbi Blaustein at the Chaim dinner. And he was, sticks out. He was my grade 3 teacher, and I still remember the impact he left. But there were some teachers that were downright bad, and the methods they used today, we would be horrified at.
But
at
we weren't.
thinking of.
But we weren't, and it didn't bother us so much.
Yeah, you're right.
Right, like the
Well, it
things
didn't
that our
bother
teachers
parents,
said
for
to
sure.
us, like, I don't feel trauma from those things. It's not like the impact wasn't so terrible. We laughed about it with our friends. Now, again, in fairness, I don't know that everyone was like that. Like, I'm not, I can only speak for myself and what I knew of my friends. I mean, there could have been certain kids who were really hurt by it, and we totally didn't notice.
Hillel, we had teachers, me and Yosef, and we're a couple of years apart. We had teachers that, when we were being taught, they were, left in the microwave a little bit too long at that point, and then they still stayed in teacher, still
Yeah,
stayed
sure.
in taught
I
for
had the
another
same
10
thing.
or 15 years.
I had a friend a few years ago. He asked me why I don't swear. Now, I want to clarify. I don't swear because I believe in speaking in a dignified manner. But I made a comment to my friend that I haven't. There's a friend who went to Yitzchayim with me, and I made a comment to him that I haven't really sworn really ever in my life. There was a period in high school maybe where I didn't talk in the cleanest way, but I never was a big swearer. And I said, because in grade 7, my Rabbi said that for every swear word you say, you're going to have to eat a piece of burning hot coal when you get to Gehenna. And
Which teacher was that in grade 7?
that was Rabbi Cohen.
Rabbi Cohen? Rabbi
Aryeh
Tzvi Cohen?
Rabbi Aryeh
Rabbi
Cohen.
Aryeh
He was
Cohen?
in the other class, yeah.
Rabbi Aryeh Cohen was amazing.
He was a great Rebbe. I still love him, but meaning there are some things that you talk about that it didn't bother. Yeah, it didn't bother me. I just said, I don't want to eat burning hot coals.
But it worked.
It worked. I don't swear. So, okay.
Okay, I want to come back to the article for a sec. The article has this eat your vegetables argument, right? Which is force your kids to go to shul, even if they don't want to, because at the end of the day, research shows that that's going to get them to go to shul as adults. Now, to me, there's a underlying premise in that argument, which is that we as adults have all come to the place that we think shul is valuable, right? And so I want to raise the question for us around this table, but generally for how we see our peers. Do we see shul as valuable? And let me give a framework for this, because I think this is how I think about shul. So to me, shul has 3 potential goals in it, 3 potential areas that it can be successful in. One is it can provide some sort of spiritual connection, some way for you to transcend your mundane, everyday life experiences, connect with Hashem, and be engaged in a spiritual level. Number 2, shul can provide some sort of intellectual fulfillment, right? So you can have access to a rabbi's speech or to classes or to learning at a level that you wouldn't otherwise have. And the third is communal, right? That shul gives you a place where you're gathering with your friends and you're being social and you're engaged in community. And so on each of those three levels, like, is shul meeting our expectations, right? So like when I walk into a shul and nobody's there or cares particularly about the rabbi's speech, and the whole shul is talking and nobody cares about what's happening in shul, but everyone wants to be there, what that says to me is that shul and that community is not being nourished spiritually or intellectually, right? That is a community shul. People are there for the social experience. And everyone can try from here to tomorrow about how it shouldn't be that way and it should be better. And all these things should happen, in a different way. But at the end of the day, the question remains, is something about that area or that need in people is not being fulfilled.
So I just want to be clear. We are now talking about adults, not children, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about ourselves.
Well, because to me, that cycles back, right? Like, meaning, if we want... this whole idea we're going to force our kids to do something, like eat their vegetables. Why do we force our kids to eat their vegetables? We force them to eat their vegetables because we know as adults their vegetables are good for them, right? And we can sit solidly in that value choice. But I think we don't force our kids to go to shul because I'm not sure we're so sure ourselves that shul is so awesome. So I think we're pretty sure about the community piece. So we're happy that our kids will come. But if they're varfing around in the hallway or they're hanging out with their friends, how different are we?
So I will say this. I'm going to speak from experience. Sometimes when I speak, I get myself into trouble. So I'm going to try to do this without getting myself into trouble.
Well, there goes the ratings.
For me, it's a little bit different. My father did not force me into it, and I was not a shul goer for the first. So number 3 was always, I love the communal, I love the social. My friends were there. I had a great time in shul. Shabbos was great, but for me, it was only Shabbos back then. I was not going to shul in the morning. Probably about 15 years ago, I was going to move my family to a different part of the city. I bought a house there, and I switched shuls for a couple of months while I was gonna, start do some renovations and move to that area. And I joined a different shul with a different rabbi, and the experience changed for me. And I think for me, this is the biggest topic or the biggest thing here: the relationship with the rabbi. I'd never experienced such a relationship before. The drushas were important, and the davening is important, but the relationship with the shul and what the shul had to offer to me, whether that's with regards to role in the shul, whether that's with regards to personal attention and relationship, the types of people that were there. This whole conversation right now revolves around parents and kids. What is the shul's responsibility to engage people? What is the shul's responsibility to engage the children? What programs are we offering children right now to keep them engaged? We talk about the schools teaching the davening, and that's important. And we talk about the parents. Are they insisting that they sit inside? Okay, that's important too. But the shuls that have youth minions, the shuls that have programs for the children, the shuls that have engagement beyond just sitting for 2.5 hours, I think that's all important to be looked at as well. And I think that there are certain shuls that...
Would you extend that to, like, the structure of shul itself?
In terms of?
I don't know. Like, I think about, there's this yeshiva in Queens, Shar HaTorah, right? I went there. It was like the elite yeshiva. It's like you either, when I was growing up, so you went to, most of the kids in the elementary school I went to Chafetz Chaim. And then this place, Yesodi Yeshurin, started, which is where I went until I got thrown out. And then there was Shar HaTorah. And Shar HaTorah was where, like, the elite, serious Gemara learners went. We went there for Shabbos in grade 8, right? And I still remember this. They didn't start with Pesukei de Zimra. They had, like, a Baruch Hutan, right? And anyone could show up at any point prior, right? And daven Pesukei de Zimra. There was no Shliach Tzibor for Pesukei de Zimra. There was just, you davened it to yourself until you got to Nishmas. Now, like, if you did something like shorten shul. So you start at Baruch Hu, right? You really want everyone to be there at Baruch Hu. You commit shul's going to go, let's say Baruch Hu's going to be 9:45, shul's going to go 9:45, 10:45. Rabbi's speech is going to be 10:45 to 11. So you're essentially asking people to show up for an hour and 15 minutes on Shabbos morning, right? That's a different ask.
I don't like it. And I'll tell you why I don't like it. I don't know how to read. Okay? I can't read very well. Hillel, you can read forever.
I have a language-based learning disability.
You tell everybody that, but meanwhile you tell everybody all the books that you read. Okay? I can't read.
I listen to them.
I can't read. I can't jog either, but I can't read. But if I am going to read a book, I shouldn't be reading the closed notes. I should be disciplining myself to read the book. Now, if somebody's going to show up at 9:45 instead of 9 o'clock, I'm okay with that. As long as they're going to take it seriously and not talk during davening and not disrupt the overall bearing of the shul, that's up to everybody how they're going to do it. To change the essence of to change the davening, to change the schedule just to be able to shorten it, why? What happens to the people that enjoy the length of it?
But Chaim, it's not a drastic change. Like you've said, as president and gabbai of your shul for many years, that you've worked on tightening things up.
Yes.
And so we're not talking about throwing things out. Psuke de Zimra out loud is a good question. Like, the value of that, and you go to, for example, let's just call it a Lakewood style minyan. Often they start at Baruch Hu, and meaning people show up for Psuke de Zimra, say it to themselves, say it out loud, whatever it is, and then as a community you start at Baruch Hu. Now in those minyanim, then they might take 2.5 hours to get to Aleinu at the end of Musaf. But aside from that, we're just talking about tightening things up.
But my point is also you get more buy-in, right? So like I show up to shul 10:20, 10:30, right? Because I don't like it. It does nothing for me spiritually, right? And it's not that shul can't do anything for me spiritually. Meaning I could be, if I'm in Israel and I go to a nice Karlbach Friday night davening, that can be a really meaningful experience for me. It's not available to me here, right? I know people have started different ones once a month or whatever it is, but for the most part, I haven't found anything that's really anchoring here where there's just buy-in from everyone in the minyan. Everyone wants to be there. Everyone wants to engage in this way. What shul is, in my experience here, is it's a place where a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas of what shul should be are crowded into one room, right? And we don't have any sort of standard expectation of why we're here, right? And my thing is if you narrow it and you say, hey, this is what we want you here for, right? And we want everyone to be here for this and to be present for this. And this is what our expectation is, right? I mean, this comes up like, this is like my high school principal hat on, right? Like if you want to get buy-in from kids in high school to do something, right? You can't yell at them, do it this way because this is the right way to do it, right? You've got to basically try and find the middle ground, talk to everyone and be like, hey, can we get you to buy into this because we want this to be serious? So if someone came to me and said, look, we're going to do shul for an hour and 15 minutes and it's going to be this and we want to try and make it serious. Are you in for that? Yeah, I'm in for trying that.
Do you not feel that you're watering down the product by doing that? Because if you are, is the juice worth the squeeze? At the end of the day, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying and I understand it. But I don't. Everybody has the ability to come and go as they please. What happens to all the people that really want the full experience? Now we're watering it down to an hour and 15 minutes because of the people that want less. Let them come during that time and take that time serious. What Yosef is talking about.
But those people who come in the middle. So first of all, let me say two things to that. One is you're right, meaning in any good market there should be a variety of different avenues, points of entry, services provided, right? And so like this is where a New Yorker in me gets frustrated, right? In a place like Toronto, because New York in general just provides more possibilities for different points of entry. Israel is on steroids. Like Israel, you got any niche minyan, Karl Bach minyan that hops on one foot and dances in a circle. We've got that for you in this, corner of Yerushalayim you can go to, right? So that should always be part of the market, right? But to me, the difference between come when you want is I have no buy-in if I'm showing up to a shul that's being run by everyone who's there, by the core 30 people who are there on time, who then get to essentially own everything in the shul, right? And again, I'm not looking, you guys know me, I'm not looking for ownership of anything. But my point is that you don't have any buy-in from any of those people who are coming late. They're the people who come late. Whereas if you make an effort to meet those people where they're at, right? And to say, we're going to create something that we want you to buy in lichatchila from, right? Then you're setting a different expectation, standard for them.
Let me challenge you back on that. And I understand that there isn't something that Hillel's not looking to start his own minion. I get that. But if let's say Hillel Rapp was one of a number of people.
But let's be clear, I did.
Oh, so I want to speak about that.
Yeah.
I want to speak about that. So,
Sure.
So, because I'm in awe of what he did.
He's doing a PhD thesis too, if you know.
Yeah. So.
Can we edit that out?
I
No one needs to know.
I enjoy hanging out with people that are smarter than me because it makes me feel smart to be in this group. But
flattery will
you
get
know,
you nowhere.
if Hillel Rapp is maybe one of 20 people where he davens that feels the way he does, maybe the answer is to start a minion, and be able to cater to those people and give them the best experience possible to appreciate it. I look at what Rabbi Kurtz has accomplished, and I'm not saying this because he's my friend, and my very important to my family in terms of education, but I look at what the minion is that he started for people that were looking for that, and he created a shul now that is bursting, okay, and a very serious place that they weren't getting it, and from all different shuls weren't getting what they were looking for perhaps, or were looking for a different product, came together, built something powerful. So I ask, if there are people looking for this tighter piece, and I'm not talking when Rabbi Kurtz brought up what I did as a gabbai or as a president, so maybe you eliminate a mishaberach, or maybe you eliminate a little bit of singing to make the program tighter. That's a lot different than what we're talking about here. But if there are a lot of people like you that want that, why not create an environment and empower them for what they're looking for? And maybe the entire experience will change.
Right. So I want to hear what Dr. Kurtz has to say, but I want to be clear. Like, to me,
Doctor, I like that. I'm going to go with that from now on.
To me, I'm not. It's not. My point is not that. Let's say personally, I'm looking to start this, or I think that there's a group looking to start something different. Mm-hmm. My point stems from the fact that, like where I started with, is adults don't have buy-in. Part of the reason kids don't have buy-in, beyond this is a great place to hang out with your friends, right? Kids don't have buy-in to the spiritual or intellectual aspects that shul can provide, is because adults don't have buy-in to the spiritual and intellectual aspects shul can provide. And part of that is because shul is not catering to the fat part of the bell curve. Shul is catering to the smaller part of the curve that is dedicated and shows up and is committed and runs the shul, right? Is
that the smaller group?
I think so. Meaning, who's there at 9:00 or who's there at 8:30 when shul starts, right? That's typically the smaller group. And if it's not, then my point's completely useless, right? Like if everyone's in shul,
maybe it is.
If everyone's in shul at 8:30 in the morning and everyone's bought in, and there's just 5 guys showing up at 10:30, great. Like then that's not that part of the bell curve. So then my point doesn't apply. But my suggestion is that the majority of people in shul are sort of passive recipients of what shul is providing, and what it's providing is a product. And I know these terms are like very business oriented, but for argument's sake, a product or a connection, a point of connection that is designed for a smaller part of the population.
So I want to say 2 things. I can't remember who showed this to me. Maybe it was you, Hillel, but someone showed me an article last year. Not an article, Rabbi Lamb's drasha from 50 years ago, where he lamented. Awesome. That was me, probably. He lamented how people in the 1970s could no longer sit for a rabbi's sermon for more than 30 minutes. How he had to now keep his drushas to 30 minutes because this generation just couldn't hack it. My point being that people evolve, shuls evolve. Any good shul needs to know that that people evolve, and making things tighter is one man's sharpening of a system and another man's like kfira. Oh my goodness, you're changing shul. You took out a mishaberach, you shortened the drasha, you took away this tiny little thing. I mean, remember that when the reform movement started, they started by moving the bima from the center of the shul to the front of the shul, and it seemed like such a silly thing almost, but it was this symbolic gesture that we no longer had to stick to tradition. So I want to be clear that I think that, as communities evolve, we have to cater to different people and meet people sometimes where they are and say, like, I understand the point of not wanting to water down things too far and not wanting to, like, okay, show up for shul 10 minutes, shkoyach. But on the other hand, there are, many people, as Hillel pointed out, that are not being engaged, are not showing up, are coming late, are disenfranchised, sitting in the back, and we have to figure out a way to engage that chevra as well. The other point I want to bring up...
before you do that, that David Bowie quote from the beginning of The Breakfast Club?
Probably.
The movie The Breakfast Club?
It's a famous quote, I forget.
Yeah, it's like,
Which one?
These children that you spit on, right,
Yeah.
as they go about their lives, they're quite aware of what they're going through, right? Like, that's what I think of when I hear Musar, like, about these things. It's like, I'm an adult. I'm 45 years old. I have a deep spiritual connection with God, right? I am, as you guys know, I am a regular learner and studier and someone who advances my knowledge as much as I can, right? This isn't doing it for me. It's not an experience that is at all meaningful for me, other than the community piece.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We're talking about shul. We're talking about the shul experience, but we're only talking about Shabbos. We're not even talking about Friday night. Yeah. We're only talking about Shabbos from 9 o'clock in the morning to 11:30. Do you feel, and I'm not asking this sarcastically, I'm asking, do you feel that what a shul does throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, plays a part in this? Is it only Shabbos? Because that's all we're talking about. We're talking about Shabbos morning.
Great question.
The experience, and we haven't talked about the walking to shul. To me, that was the most fascinating part, or at least the part that hit me the hardest as a father, which I could explain later. But what a shul does in terms of programming for husbands, whether it's a kollel in the morning, and again, it doesn't have to be it could be teaching anything, or scholars in residence, or yarchei kalas, or things for wives or kids. Does that not play into the entire experience to bring people closer in the understanding, or are we only talking about Shabbos morning?
So I agree with you. I mean, I think it does. I think when I think of Shabbos morning, I mean, other than the fact that that's my primary engagement with shul, because my tefillah in my house are far more fulfilling for me spiritually and provide a far deeper connection than I can get in a daily minyan at this point in my life. And I don't know that that'll change at some point. Lots of things.
Which is
change.
an incredibly interesting statement. An incredibly interesting statement.
And that's just the reality,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Now, but speaking more communally, even so, I think Shabbos morning is your largest audience, right? So that is the most engagement you're going to have, which is why I think where I was focusing on, or maybe though it was personal as well, I also think you get different groups. Like your daily minyan goers are a very different group than your Shabbos morning minyan goers, right? Friday night maybe mixes in with that a little. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Yos, what do you think?
I think it's a very interesting point, and I think that that's a little bit, I brought this up earlier in the conversation, that's a little bit where we're failing. Like, I don't think we're failing at Shabbos morning en masse. People are still showing up Shabbos morning. Will that be the case in 10, 15, 20 years? I don't know. Maybe the writing's on the wall, because, I would make a guess that if we did the research, far less people are showing up during the week today than they were 30, 40 years ago. And that's an important point. And I think that we have to do a better job at engaging people 7 days a week, for sure. I think that that's a great point that you bring up. Now, it happens to be that most shuls you walk into during the week, again, you mentioned kolalim and there's shiurim and here and there for sure, but the vast majority of people are running in and out for minyan on their way to work. Even if a shul is a successful kollel, I imagine most people are able to just, sneak in and out. And the experience becomes almost a business-like transaction and less engaging. But maybe that's where we have to be even more creative.
I just think that every shul has its own DNA, and every rabbi has its own DNA. I look at Rabbi Kurtz's Shabbos morning minyan, where he gives a drasha for a half an hour before davening starts. I would say on the Shabbosim that I were there, you get 20, 25 people there. I mean, it's a healthy group. Before davening even starts, it's a healthy group. And it gets people engaged early on. And again, it's 9 o'clock. It's not like we're asking people to show up at 7. I really feel, without getting myself into trouble for saying that, I think that a lot of this is on the rabbis. Really thinking about what their kihila needs. And it's a hard job. You have a lot of people, especially the bigger shuls, you have a lot of people from a lot of different groups, and people are going to feel more engaged and less engaged, and some will feel abandoned and some will feel focused on. But at the end of the day, everything moves the needle a little bit closer. So if I'm going to have and I don't know any shul that does this, so I'm not advocating right now. But if there was a shul, a rabbi that said, you know what, Wednesdays at 8 o'clock we're going to teach tefillah, okay, and we're going to focus on different tefillahs on Shabbos, so that when you go, you know what you're davening. Like these types of things, you might only get 5 or 10 people to start, but people are actually going to know what they're davening.
I can't disagree with you more. And again, maybe this is just me.
Tell me.
There's some line where we cross where maybe I'm just different. I mean, I probably am different. The Yehuda Israel, right? And there are no rabbis, right? I mean, there are rabbis in Israel, but there are no shul rabbis the way you have here. Mm-hmm. And you have more niche sort of avenues for connection and different styles of shul, right? That serve different people. I think rabbis, by nature, are political animals to a large extent, right? And taking nothing away from what rabbis bring to the table, and so they're always trying to create the biggest tent possible, right? And they're always trying to engage people with their personalities, right? And I don't know that a rabbi is necessarily the best vehicle to provide people a variety of points of entry. I think ability to find like-minded people who are looking for the same thing you're looking for, right? Like, I would take a half-hour sermon if Rabbi Norman Lamb was giving the sermon. I'd take that any day of the week, right? Because that's interesting to me. Now, I don't think a lot of people are like that, but I'm guessing I could probably find a group of people who are similar, right? That's, I think, where, like, that would be interesting to me, to find the people, right, within my community who align with me on interests, right? And find avenues for those interests. And I don't think rabbis, some do, but I think a lot of rabbis work in sort of a different paradigm than that. They're looking for the shul with everyone there and everyone, looking at them when they're giving their sermon.
So let me ask you a question. 30 years ago growing up in Toronto, 40 years ago growing up in Toronto, and I asked this to Dr.
I was in Queens.
Dr. Kurtz, right? I asked this to Dr. Kurtz, who was in Toronto while you
never should have brought up that doctor.
So here's my question.
He's not calling you smart every 5 seconds.
Why is it today there are so many splintered shuls where we have to have 3 or 4 mini shuls because everybody wants what they want? Where when we were growing up, the big shuls housed most of the action. Is it that people became less tolerant of being part of a bigger group and need smaller attention to what their needs are?
So, yeah, part of it goes back to what we talked about earlier about resilience and 40 years ago. You don't like it. Who cares? Sit here and suffer like the rest of us. What I was going to say...
But that was the kids. I'm talking about the adults.
Even
now.
the adults.
the adults.
Even the adults.
It was also
By the way,
it was very post-Holocaust. It was like, this is what we got to do.
This is what we got to do.
We got to keep it alive.
What I was going to bring up earlier, before you rudely cut me off.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry.
It was for sure Hillel.
This got a lot of press during COVID, but in the whatever it was in the mid 19th century, as Rav Hirsch was battling the Haskalah movement in Germany, and this is brought in his biography, he surmised once what he said. I wonder if it would be helpful to shut down all shuls for a year and teach people what's really important and have a reset almost. What? Because the point that was being brought up is that, shul as a cultural center, shul as a social center, and his point was if we shut down shuls for a year, the Orthodox people will still daven, will still come back, we'll have a reset in terms of what's really important, we'll come back stronger than ever. And the Reform shuls will go to the wayside. Nobody will come back, and we saw that play out a little bit during COVID. 5-6 years ago, whenever COVID started, people learned that their shul experience did not need to be that same resilient. This is how it has to be, like it was for 40, 50 years. People went to side minyanim. People even went to their shuls, and it was smaller, and it was more efficient because, you cut out. I remember we hung out in Shomer Shabbos, and you could only be in a room of 10 people, and, shul was just more efficient and took out all the frills and took out, all this stuff that you realize.
But remember, everyone was predicting everything was going to change in shul after COVID.
Things did shift, though.
You know what it reminds me of? And
my shul started from that as an outgrowth of people in a backyard minyan saying we no longer want to go back to the way it used to be. So I'm not saying the world changed, but it changed for some.
You know what it reminds me of, and it's a completely different topic, maybe an important podcast down the road. The money that people spend on simchas. It reminds me of this as well.
Yeah.
During, we all spend a lot of time raising money for people who can't afford to make simchas today. It's so expensive.
And by we all, you mean?
all of us around the table, some more than others. But a lot of it is keeping up with the Joneses, right? Yeah. And during COVID, I remember this conversation vividly.
It was in every Mishpacha magazine.
With certain Rabbanim in the city saying, look, all of a sudden we've gone from making 800-person weddings to 30-person weddings, and they're beautiful, and they're wonderful, and they cost $3,000 instead of $100. It'd be great if we have a sort of like a rule, okay, or a takana that from now on this has to be the standard, no more than 100 people. And everybody said that's a great idea. We should do that. And right after we came back from COVID, we went right back to the way it was.
Maybe we got worse even.
Pardon me?
We might have got worse even.
In some ways, we're compensating for what we missed out on. But yeah, it's the same type of idea, I think, a little bit, in that we went back to what we were familiar with, and maybe even a little bit more.
I actually think a lot of shuls adapted after COVID. I could point to most large shuls in Toronto and point to changes that were made after COVID. Shomer Shabbos went through changes, right? Shari Shamayim went through changes. I'm saying positive changes that enhanced the experience, that caused people to say, do we really need, these are the 3 minyanim we had, but now we had a year-long reset, so maybe we could have intentional minyanim.
Right.
A lot of shuls did that in a positive way, and I think that, it's not something we would ever want again. We never want to shut down our shuls again. But it is important to be intentional about, because what are we really talking about here is how to connect people to the Ribono Shel Olam and how to connect people to each other, to Am Yisrael. Because if it was just about the Ribono Shel Olam, our shuls would just be minyanim. We wouldn't have kiddush. We wouldn't have, social events. We wouldn't have dinners, but we want to connect people to each other and to the Ribono Shalom. And, we need, I think, perhaps what's needed more than anything is to be understanding that different people have different needs, and to be embracing of other styles and other people and other minyanim and other, someone feels that they need Karlbach, and so we need to embrace that and
But embrace it, but just expand on that. Embrace it within the shul to offer another focus, or open up another shul. It is a big conversation.
But can I give you the other, so this is the best articulation of the argument not to do this, and it came from my time as a rabbi. Little known fact, although I don't have smicha, I was an assistant rabbi for a few years of my life in Manhattan.
It's not little known because I tell everybody.
KJ. And Rabbi Lookstein, this was actually right when this was happening at KJ, right? Where it was the last stand of Rabbi Lookstein to not allow other minyanim in the shul, right? Rabbi Lookstein reluctantly allowed a hashkama minyan twice a month. Mm-hmm. There could be a young people's minyan only once a month. If you go to KJ now, they have a Sephardic minyan, they have a young people's minyan every week. They have I assume they have hashkama minyan every week, right? All of that stuff, eventually he lost that battle eventually, right? But his argument was, and he articulated this I'm pretty sure verbatim many times. The reason I can organize this community to raise X dollars around a particular cause when it's needed is because I have everyone sitting in the shul, in one shul on Shabbos morning, right? And once you start splitting apart your community, you no longer have that power of unity that you had
So
before.
I will tell you, at the shul I daven in, there are many different minyanim, but you have them all housed in one big building, and everything that goes on.
But could the senior rabbi, Rabbi Lookstein was a powerhouse, right?
Right.
I mean, he is a powerhouse, right? But he, could the senior rabbi of a shul with 4 or 5 different minyanim bring his community together in a moment of crisis or when he needs them? Does he have that authority with his community, or does each rabbi of their minyan really have the authority with their minyan?
Look, Dr. Kurtz will tell you, where I daven, there are 2 rabbanim. There's the Rav and his son, who's the assistant Rav, both powerhouses. But the minyanim don't have their own rabbis other than the Rav and the assistant Rav.
Right.
The shul is run by the Rav. And there is no confusion there. And everything that goes on is done under the guidance religiously of that Rav. And for our shul, I think it's the secret sauce of the shul. I think it's not a secret. I think it's the sauce of the shul. And I'm sure it's a hard job. You have a lot of different things going on.
Interestingly, Rabbi Lookstein went viral earlier this year for his, in a podcast pre-Yontiv, where he talked about how when he was younger, it was always very important that, whatever was a certain tefillah on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you did nusach and didn't sing it. And then, his son pushed him to allow singing during that tefillah, and he said it was the most impactful tefillah he's ever had when he was crying when he was listening to his son perform it, and not perform it, but daven it in davening. And his point was that you have to adapt, and he used to be much more hardline. And Rabbi Felder is my Rav. I do think that Rabbi Felder taught me more than anyone the importance of never just doing what's done because it's done, but always being intentional and always thinking about how to engage people, not today, but in 10 years from now. And that's very important. And that is part of the reason why shuls need to evolve and adapt and engage our adults and our young people in ways that maybe weren't necessary 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Maybe they were necessary then, but they just weren't valued as much.
I'm also going to say, to the point, the Rabbi Lookstein point, the amount of chesed, and I'm sure it's done in many of the shuls in the city and around the world, but the amount of chesed that Rabbi Felder what he collects for people during the Yom Tovim is, I mean, the amount of chesed that goes on in that building is inspirational, and I mean, I'm privy to some of the monies that go through.
So it sounds like we have these two paradigms working, right? Like on the one hand, let's call it the Rabbi Luxstein, Rabbi Felder paradigm, which may be the only time Rabbi Luxstein and Rabbi Felder were put in the same paradigm, right? But the Rabbi Luxstein, Rabbi Felder paradigm, where you have this very strong Rav, this very strong personality who's leading, who's clearly the leader of a community, who can then rally that community around a particular cause, right? And then you have another paradigm of everyone sort of looking for their niche, the thing that satisfies them. And maybe in the strong Rav paradigm, lots of people just don't find exactly what they're looking for, right? But they have this sort of larger sense of community. I guess this gets me to maybe the last question we'll explore is like, in my framing of Shul being spiritual, intellectual, communal, right? Like those are the three possible avenues that Shul can provide. Are they at odds with each other? Like, can you be a strong communal Shul and also cater enough to sort of the intellectual niches and slices of your community or the spiritual like needs? Like, right, you and I share a brother-in-law friend, right? Who for him, the Shul being what Shul has always been and being predictable and on time and scheduled is exactly what he expects Shul to be, right? For someone else, they might be looking for something that's more emotionally engaging, more spiritually engaging, more something that tugs at them in a more heartfelt way. Can you have that communal element? Like, we're all here together. This is an awesome community. We all really like each other. My shul has that. Everyone who's in that building on Shabbos seems to genuinely like each other, right? But it's got nothing else. It's not providing any of the other pieces for the most part. So the question is, like, are these goals at odds with each other fundamentally?
I don't know if they're odds with each other, but there's certainly a formula that works, and that formula changes for every shul. Shomer Shabbos, when I went there, when I started going there 15 years ago, Shomer Shabbos does not have a Kiddush club. Okay, and I'm not here to promote or take away from what Kiddush Club is. I am certainly appreciative of everything that Kiddush Club brings to the table. They don't have a Kiddush Club. They have a Sar HaMashkin, okay, at Kiddush, where somebody is there pouring the booze. People aren't able to pour their own shots, and the kids. Everybody expects that at Shomer Shabbos. Nobody puts up a fight. Nobody says it because that's what Rabbi Felder wants. And Rabbi Felder, and I'm not going to say that everybody, if they started a shul, that would be it. But they followed through. I don't think they compete with one another. I think they almost complement one another. But it has to come from the top. And understanding, maybe my shul does need a Hashkam minyan. Maybe my shul does need a minyan that starts a little bit later. Understanding what the needs are.
You're in the benevolent rabbi mode.
Pardon me?
You're in the benevolent ruler mode. Like, meaning you want a melech, and to the extent that person can, or that rabbi can provide and see where their particular needs, that's great.
I am a fan, whether it's in the form of schools or whether it's in the form of shuls or whether it's in the form of communal institutions. I am a fan of watching great leadership and understanding, watching somebody who understands what the needs are within their community and trying as hard as they can to check off all the boxes. Dr. Kurtz is right. Rabbi Kurtz is right.
We started off this podcast calling me Yosef.
Would you like to be Rabbi Doctor? We can do that too.
Rabbi Dr. Yosef Kurtz is right. Rabbi Felder is the kind of person that has enormous amounts of patience, okay, and knows what needs to get done and is going to get there.
And humility. And I think that's
humility. But I don't want to focus this about
no. I don't want to focus on that either. But I believe that those points are not at odds with each other. It's very hard, and it requires leadership that has a very healthy sense of one's own strengths and one's own weaknesses, and bring in other people to provide what they can't give to those, to those members of the community that need something else that they're not addressing. So you talk about, intellectualism, you talk about community, you talk about all these different points that I don't see why they would ever be at odds with each other. They're just very hard to bring under one roof. There are places in the world that do it. I think that, you look at some small town shuls that are just like, very strong in that regard. They have a very strong community. People really rely on each other, depend on each other, love each other. High intellectual engagement, spiritual engagement. Just like the Dusty Israel in Hamilton, comes to mind as being a place that, smaller towns that everyone is by default often under one roof. Sometimes you get that combination that works.
But does that work in the same way? Like, is that just because there's this I think you look at what is, and you can kind of see where the value set is, right? So in an out-of-town shul, because they're out of town, right, the need for community just overrides everything. And so everyone's willing to set aside lots of different individual preferences because we have to come together as community. Without this, we don't have anything binding us together. Whereas in town shul, we'll have just one niche that sort of it provides because there's other options. People don't have to be there. I guess my point is, like, I don't know, like, going back to the core issue here, like, I don't know that we're going to solve the kids' problem, right? The problem of kids not coming to shul or not being engaged, let's say the way we were, until we come to terms with what adults are actually looking for out of shul.
Look, I will say this. In baseball, you can have a pitcher who is really not performing at his best on one team and moves over to another team and
Turns it on.
And you see it all the time. The rules haven't changed.
Right.
The pitch counts are the same. The umpires are the same, literally the same, and they're playing against the same teams. How is it that it turned around? And the answer is because the different pitching staffs and the different coaches are focusing on different areas, and they're seeing the best piece of themselves. I went to one shul, I was one way. I went to another shul, I became another way. And it didn't take that long for that shift to happen. The tefillah didn't change. They davened at the exact same time. They were 2 blocks away. For me personally, it was the Rav, not the tefillah. It wasn't the time. It was what he was bringing to a shul. Now, I'm not here to promote any one shul. I'm just saying, I think that, like Yosef said, I don't think they compete with each other. I think they complement each other. And different people are looking for different things. But before we end the podcast, I want to focus on one other thing. At the end, and I said this before, at the end of the article, it talks about the time being spent between father and son. That hit me more than anything else. I spend a lot of time away from home, whether I was traveling during my working career, or communal. The one question that I have, Hillel, maybe you can explain it to me, is the time walking to shul is important, and it shouldn't be lost. I don't know if that translates to the davening piece. I think, for me, myself, I have to always prioritize more time at home. I'm a person that always said I was going to do it, and at the age of 50 or 49, I started doing it. I have a very patient wife and very patient children, but I waited too long. I think there's a very big difference between the walking to shul aspect and this forcing them to sit next to them aspect. Do you agree with the author that the walking to shul translates to the davening, or just it's an opportunity to take with the child?
I think the research shows that it's a very big part of it.
Okay.
Is the positive psychological aspect of creating that meaningful experience that the child on a conscious or subconscious level will look back on and have fond memories of and want to create a similar experience for themselves and for their own children. And that happens, forcing a child can also be positive. Like, it doesn't have to be negative to force a child. I spoke to a parent recently who forced their child to come with them to Minyan every day and then made them French toast after. Meaning they figured out a way to create a positive relationship and aspect around forcing their child to shul. So I don't think those things either are at odds with each other.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as bought in. I think anecdotally, yeah, I think the research makes sense that, you know, the more positive interactions and memories we create with our children, the more they're going to share a value set with us as they get older. I think that comes in many different forms, but I'm less convinced about the forcing approach versus not forcing. I think for every anecdote I know of the parents who forced their kids and it turned out great, I know of another anecdote of the parents who forced their kids, and even with the kids went along with it, and even the kids didn't push back, they're just like, yeah, it's not for me, right? Like I don't know, and you know, and I'm skeptical of these research projects in general, the OU project. I mean, certainly that first part that interviewed 30 people, I'm certainly skeptical of in terms of what it's really revealing. But I'm not sure that these things. I think having great relationships with your kids is great. And if you're finding time to do that on a walk to shul, my walk to shul is a block and a half. Right? It's not setting up so much time for a relationship. But any way you can find that is great. I think I'm still stuck on the main point that at the end of the day, I look around. I myself am included in this, and I look around, and I see many people who are engaged in the communal aspects of shul. And I don't see as many people who are engaged in the spiritual and intellectual aspects of shul. And I think that to me is, and I think there's disconnect when we keep talking about shul from a spiritual, intellectual perspective, learning Torah and davening should be this way. But yet that's just not where people are coming from, right? That shul is not feeding that itch for them. I see it more in Israel, right? I see it more when you have a sort of really diversified community that everyone kind of find their little place in their little minyan. I think there's more of that in those types of environments, but in the classical North American model, I don't see that.
I got to tell you, I went to see my brother in Rechavia.
Renana.
Renana, sorry, not Rechavia, Renana. And, I mean, I saw that. And I'm sure all of these shuls have that same. So many different people from so many different walks of life, full, kids, and no frills.
Yep. Just
wanting to be there. And you didn't have people talking during davening or out in the halls or anything like that. They were in the hall. They weren't disruptive at all. And then when it was over, they all had their kiddush.
Yep. And you know what else you get in Israel? Friday nights, that everyone comes to shul. Now the weather helps.
Women as well.
Yep. You get a Friday night, everyone's there. Mm-hmm. So the time actually when you're in your best mood, right? And like everyone knows this. Best time of the week is the beginning of Shabbos. Right? It's when the whole weekend's ahead of you and you're in your best mood. I think Toronto's got a challenge that it's freezing cold. So who wants to leave their house on Friday night when it's that cold? But I think that, it doesn't happen in the summer here either. Anyway, on that happy note,
I think this conversation has to continue in other aspects as well, not only shul. I mean, I'm sure in some ways schools, you could have the same type of conversation from when we were kids versus today and levels of engagement, correct?
Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely.
Love you guys. Bye-bye.